All right, and welcome to Better Together.
I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Tony. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, look, we are going to be presenting a 5 or 6 part series on communication. How important is understanding communication?
Extremely important. Understanding it and communicating well.
Let me ask you this. We've been married for 23 years. Is there still a need for improved communication?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think anybody who's been married for any amount of time, and I think all of us could agree that this is a definite area that we need to grow in. So we want to take a look at, again, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 parts in this particular series that are going to address some common issues. One, let's talk about understanding communication styles. Now, people always communicate differently, and there's some reasons that they communicate differently. We're going to jump into those in just a moment. But let's look at what some personal communication styles or the primary communication styles of people are, or some of them. Again, this is not for everybody, but see where you kind of fit on the spectrum. All right?
So what are the 4
this is ran across
styles?
this 4 primary communication styles. Now this is adaptable and adapted in different situations, but let's look at them. One is what's called passive communication. So are you a passive communicator?
Probably.
Okay, well let's see. Let's give it a passive communicator says something like this. I don't care one way or the other. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. It's okay. In some areas, I'm a very passive communicator because I'm very passive on the topic, but it kind of makes a difference. Sometimes I care about what we're talking about. Like where we eat, I don't really care, so I may be very passive. What about you? Are you by nature a very passive communicator?
I would say I'm probably not.
Not, yeah, okay. Well, maybe you're passive aggressive.
That would probably be me.
So a passive-aggressive person says, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just take care of it myself. That is when there is aggression, but you don't apply it directly. It's indirect aggression towards somebody. I think maybe we're all guilty of that at one time or the other.
I was going to say, so yeah, you wait and you wait and you wait for someone to do something and then finally go, I'm going to do it. And hey, by the way, I'm doing it.
Or, hey, right? Thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it. Again, can you relate? Hey, really appreciate that. Thanks for jumping in there and helping me out and knowing good passive-aggressive behavior.
Yeah.
That is very, very common and not necessarily healthy. So what's the third way of communicating? It's aggressive communication. Now that's an over-opinionated person who says it's my way or the highway. That would sound something like this. We're doing it my way, end of the discussion.
Oh, I've lived like that.
Okay, you mean...
Most of my life I've lived like that.
Being communicated to or communicating that way? Being
communicated to.
Okay, all right, good. That tells you what type of horrible husband that she has. No. There's a lot that affects our communication styles and growing up and history and work environments, and a lot of those things can really, really play into it. So are you that tyrannical, aggressive communicator? Well, there's another type of communication called the assertive communication. Assertive communication, there are some things that says this. It says, that's a great idea, but have you considered? Well, what it means is you take an active role in a very healthy way in the communication. It's not my way or the highway. It's almost as if to say, based upon the exercise of emotional intelligence, hey, let's come reason together.
See, and that's not how I would have taken that. I would have taken that, okay, so you're giving, my idea was just okay, but now you have a better plan.
Okay, yeah.
For this particular thing.
Well, what if you did? What if somebody shares with you an idea? Let's just say we're having a conversation and you say, hey, I want to go on vacation to Hawaii, okay? And you say, well, Hawaii sounds fun, but what if we considered, those other islands over near Hawaii that are like more affordable?
None.
All right, never mind. It's in the middle. It's in the middle of nowhere.
I was going to say the Fiji Islands.
You say, Fiji. Let's just say, and you go, hey,
expensive.
Yeah. Would you consider Fiji? Hey, what about Fiji? So just think about the communication that just happened there. Say, hey, you want to go to Hawaii, or let's go to Hawaii for a vacation.
Oh no, wait, that sounds great, but have you considered taking me to Fiji?
Okay, that seems so fake. Yeah, no.
Really?
So, but think about it. What is going to get the better response? No, absolutely not. I want to go to Hawaii. But what if you say, well, could we consider maybe Fiji? It has a lot in common. It's a little bit different, but and then you give a reason why.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying that one style of communication would be the tyrannical. No, absolutely. I don't want to go to, forget it. I'm not going to Hawaii. I don't want to go to Hawaii. And maybe you don't really mind going to Hawaii, but there's somewhere that you would like to go better. It's not, and this is important. I'll just go ahead and say this from the onset. In marriage and in communication, you don't always have to agree. Okay, you need to settle the issue. You need to come to a conclusion or a resolve, but it's not a bad guy and a good guy, or a good guy and a bad guy. Generally, it's just preferences. And when we prefer one another, it can become a beautiful dance of communication.
I like that.
And when we offer respect and we offer honor and some of those particular things, but you brought up something a few moments ago. You said a lot of the communication that I have experienced has a lot to do with, or that you share has a lot to do with what you've experienced. So how has your personal history or personal background influenced your communication style?
Well, I think a lot of times from when I was growing up, I don't know if it was because I was the only child and my parents had no one else to blame other than me.
And we had old school parents.
We did.
So there you go, which I'm not saying is bad. Maybe you had old school parents as well.
Not at all, but it was pretty much my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And what Daddy said went.
And I will be honest with you, very often I don't make it a habit of over-reasoning with my children. I like to give them the why.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, but very often you're doing what is best for them, not what necessarily makes them happy. I know that's a whole other series, but just consider that. It's not healthy to always give your children their way. It's just not. It's to their detriment.
Yeah, and what about you? How has your experiences and maybe how you've grown up or known people?
I think more so some of the work environments that I've been in have probably affected my communication more so than growing up, because I think communication and communication skills are something that you can grow in and adapt to your entire life. Being in a leadership position currently in my life, I really want to be an assertive leader. I want to be confident. There's things that I want, but you know what? I want the best for myself and for the organization. So that being said, I want to communicate in a way that leaves the door open for input. And quite frankly, that's because I've been around people who have had those values and exercised those skills, and it's good. So the idea of reasoning together is a good idea, and it's something that's prevalent again because of my work environment. As far as home, I had very different growing up experience, than yourself. My parents, they divorced. I had a stepmom later on, and I had to adapt to different communication styles. My father was very direct at times, but then at other times he would not confront things. There wasn't clarity, and for a lot of different reasons. But that leads me to another question. What about the role in communication, and this is very important, what about the role of non-verbal things? Because even with my parents, I would learn as a child to read the room, kind of see what kind of mood they're in. You did it. I'm sure there was times when you said, you know what, I'm not going to ask my dad if I can go out. I'm going to wait until a more opportune moment. Maybe he comes home and he's grumpy or he's screaming or yelling. But what about nonverbal communication? How important is that in recognizing and communicating effectively?
Yeah, I would say that you have to be a student of others, and to know what they're trying to communicate in a nonverbal way.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's, crossing of the arms, or I don't know. What are some ways people nonverbally communicate?
Well, there's a ton of them.
Like I'm saying an eye roll. Well, that's a disrespect.
Oh, yeah, but that's an obvious one. Yeah. I had 4 teenagers in the house at one time, so I know the eye roll. It looked more like seizures at times. But I think it's not only important in communication and growing in communication to recognize the the nonverbal communication in others, I think it's important that we recognize the signals that we are sending. Because sometimes we send mixed signals. I'll be talking to you and I can tell I've got my mind, I'm kind of fragmented in the conversation, and you may get an eye roll. There's been times when I was having a conversation, not realizing that I was kind of posturing in the conversation, only to have somebody later say, you seemed a little aggressive in that. And very often when we are insecure in a situation or we feel threatened, there are nonverbal things that will happen, even with you and I, when we're having a conflict and we're trying to reach a resolution through communication. I want to be careful to observe what you're not saying and saying through that nonverbal communication, but I also want to be careful about what I'm conveying. Because if I'm slamming stuff and doing stuff, I can be exacerbating the situation and not even realize it. So being aware of our own is just as important as recognizing it in others. So yeah, crossing of the arms, rolling of the eyes, huffing, the shaking of the head. I mean, there's the facial expressions.
I was about to say, yeah, I feel like I have this tendency to get so focused in here that I do this furrow of the brow, and I don't mean to. It's just
sometimes I'll walk over and I'll just go, okay, let's just lighten up, relax.
I'm like, oh yeah.
Because our feelings and what we want to communicate, quite frankly, it does show on our faces. What about the importance of you understanding my style and me understanding your style of communication? We've been together a long time, and I think it's important for me to realize that when you get amped or you get excited or passionate about something, there's still room. It's not totally resolved. You may have an opinion, you may have a perspective, but it's important for me to recognize your communication style if you become assertive in that or whatever it looks like.
Right. So I feel sometimes there is a chance to have miscommunication in, like, when you speak elevated voice tones,
right?
That it's you might have a tendency, or I might have a tendency to get really defensive,
right?
And then that kind of, I'm not meaning to, or you're not meaning to, but
you've got to know what you're dealing with. And I'll be honest with you, I think you and myself and everyone watching would admit we probably have very different communication styles depending on the moment or the situation that we're in. I mean, and so how important is it to have a strategy to adapt and respect those different styles? I mean, even if the person is very assertive, very aggressive in their communication style, it doesn't mean that we don't show them respect. I mean, there are times that,
I would say that as people, wherever you find yourself, that if you get into like an aggressive type situation, I think it's important to recognize in yourself and in others not to meet them in their level of aggression.
Right.
And maybe go lower, if that makes sense.
It's incredibly important to recognize it in other people. And again, I want to say the double-sided coin thing. We want to recognize the style or what's going on in our partner's communication, but we also want to be very, very aware and attuned to how we're coming across. So we want to give you some homework. All right, just consider this. Maybe you're watching with your wife or your husband right now. Just a couple questions or one homework action point. Identify your own and your partner's primary communication style. I want you to think about that. That's important. And if your communication style is not, and you say, well, I don't know my communication style. Well, I got a really good opportunity for you to bond. Ask your partner, what is my primary communication style, and how can we learn to adapt to each other in that area?
Oh, I like that.
That's good stuff. I like that. So give us some homework. So because your communication style is, now we're going to come back in the next episode and we're going to be talking about active listening and empathy in the context of communication. Yeah, so empathy is kind of important, learning to walk a mile in another person's shoes, and that doesn't always come naturally. Hey, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Better Together.